Hello.
Hey Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Try to make sure I don't get cut off. There we go.
Likewise. So should we wait a minute before getting started?
Absolutely.
First, I want to say hello to everyone who is joining us from gorgeous sunny England. You will see all of these reflections on me, and it's the unexpected sunlight that's streaming through my windows. And are you at the studio?
I am. I'm in our offices. I'm in the meeting room there. Yeah. And I've had to shut the blinds. It's so bright.
Yes. What is happening?
Oh, it's wonderful. Well, May is always the best month in Britain.
Yes.
You know, I just wish I had a garden.
I've just spent a long time chopping it because it was growing a little bit too much. So I'm saying hello to everyone who's joining us. There are people from Mumbai, from New York.
Wonderful.
Very exciting. So I would like to welcome I think it's 5 o'clock. So I would like to welcome everyone to our first conversation hosted by Interiors Academy. And today we're thrilled to be hosting Tim Butcher. Tim is the co-founder of Fromental. Fromental is the British brand known for their exquisite hand-painted and hand-embroidered wallpapers and fabrics. Let me tell you a little bit more about Tim. After graduating in textiles as a weaver, he spent 2 years in tailoring, producing silks for leading designers, including Paul Smith and Ralph Lauren. Tim's creative focus has always been on both technology and the visuals of design. And in 2005, he founded Fromental together with his partner, Lizzie DeHaze. So welcome, Tim. I understand this is Fromental's 15th year.
It is.
Congratulations. How did Fromental start? What is the personal narrative behind the brand?
Well, I fallen in love with hand-painted wallpapers and Chinese wallpapers for years before. My background previously was fashion, but I discovered Chinese wallpapers with the company I worked with in the past in the late 90s, and I absolutely fell in love with them. Lizzie, my wife and partner in all aspects of life, is a painter, a decorative painter. I mean, she's really a surface designer to begin with, but then the years before launching Fromental, she was working as a muralist as well as surface design. So the two of us had this joint passion, and where we felt that we really had a desire to launch Fromental was to revisit this incredible medium of hand-painted and large-scale scenic wallpaper, but to try to approach it with a truly 21st century aesthetic. So not in any way reinvent the wheel, because all of us in design, we know we work with one foot in the past. We're constantly building on their heritage, but we felt very strongly that there was a way of, an aesthetic that was not being catered for, and a degree of experimentation and sort of boldness in design which we didn't feel existed. So we began Fromental just with a very clear basic vision. We wanted to make the most beautiful wallpapers in the world, and that is what drives us still today. Whenever we pause and ask ourselves, what are we doing? Why do we do it? To make the most beautiful wallpapers we possibly can, and to try to add our small stone onto this sort of pyramid of the heritage of decorative design.
That's something that I greatly admire in the designs that Fromental produces, is your understanding of history and heritage, and yet you move forward with it. what in your view makes Fromental unique in your segment of the market? And if you could tell us a little bit more about the role of the studio.
Well, I think really it's the fact that everything is run from the studio. We're not a large company. We're a small company. We've grown, but no matter how big we get, which is more globally than anything else, because I think one of the things that's clear is, and I'm sure other people in our part of the world understand this, is, you know, the wonderful thing about working within the luxury end of your market, you need to be international very, very quickly. So we're a very small company with a very international reach, which brings all sorts of different complexities to the scale of the business. But one thing which has always been central to all of that, we run from the studio. My wife and I have our hand fully involved in any of the design development. We work with all of our studio, and obviously everybody within their studio is part of that conversation. But every decision is taken from that viewpoint, you know, the viewpoint of the design element, the design statement, and the aesthetics that we want to produce. And that does, you know, there's a lot of other, there's other drives and parameters in any organization, in any business. But we constantly have that creativity and design aspect as the driving force behind what we do. Very much sort of, you know, in every question and everything that guides where we go is coming from that designs, you know, the studio at the heart of the whole business. Whether it always leads to the wisest commercial decisions, who knows? Doesn't really matter. That's not, you know, there's a commercial necessity, but it's not what drives us.
And when you're creating your new designs, what tools do you use? Because obviously they're computers, there's the brush. And you use both.
Well, I think a hugely important element of that, we often, in many aspects of design, the design element and the creativity is so often thought about in the graphic, in the image, in those aspects. It isn't. It feeds through every part of what you do. The way that we approach design, and me personally, is my background is as a weaver. Lizzie is a surface designer and an excellent draftsman. I am very much more about how can we make it, and what new techniques and tools can we use to create other objects, and, you know, and design in different ways. And I think that is central to a lot of the things we do. A huge part of our collection, although everyone always thinks, you know, hand painting, we think of the very obvious figurative, bird, flower, the graphic, the imagery. An equal weight within our design ethos is the materiality and the process, and how they can drive a design forwards. You know, for instance, you know, we have a piece in the collection called Rexine, which is a piece I've always loved. And it's a torn collage of handmade papers. And, you know, the way that we make that, and the way that we work with our artisans in the studios in China, are an equal sort of input into the creative process as the graphic and specifically visual composition. And I think that's run through a lot of our history as well. You know, we were the first people to introduce embroidery into the silk wallpapers, which, you know, have been coming in from China for, you know, close to 300 years. You know, embroidery has been coming in, but bringing the embroidery in was the kind of innovation which is central to who we are.
So I'm sorry to have interrupted. So you embroider over the silk to enhance it, to pick up details.
Well, through it, you know, all of the materials that we produce, you know, again, you tend to see the surface layer of the painting. But in order to make this paper, which is behind us, it's a very fine silk, which is mounted onto a soft rice paper. The design is built up in layers, then further paper is put on the back. So there's already a sort of a layering of process. So when we embroider through it, partway through that process, we introduce the stitching through those layers and then encapsulate it with the final layer of backing.
And are you collaborating with anyone right now on your collections?
We've loved this sort of evolution over the past years, where, you know, you collaborate with our clients and designers. And I always enjoy that as a fascinating experiment. I mean, every project we work on is to some degree a collaboration, because we have a very wide set of collections with a whole, very wide gamut of aesthetics. But every time they are used in a new environment, it's redesigned to some degree. So that process of working within another designer's vision is something that we're very, very comfortable to do. So where that's moved further forward now is actually collaborating very early on in whole collections with designers. So the different pieces we've done and the ones which we continue to work on last year, I was really, really pleased with the collaboration we did with Lalique, obviously the iconic crystal producer. And that was fascinating, because what that gave us was they allowed us into their archive and working within their heritage and their own history to extract some of these iconic pieces and render them with what we do. And the way that we do it, we then put the crystal, gets mounted back into the wallpaper after. But what we're doing at the moment, we're working with Nicole Fuller, and we're doing a really fun design we're working on with her, which is about to be launched any time now. I won't go into it too much, that'll have its own story, but it's particularly cool. And what's nice about that collaboration, as with all of the other ones, it's part us and it's part Nicole. It's very, very Fromental, it's very Nicole Fuller. We're doing a piece with Amy Lau at the moment, which is a really interesting development. It's, Amy's really driven that, and we layer 6 or 7 different processes in all sorts of different experimental ways to create something. Last year, we did a fab fun design with Natalia Maillard at Masterpiece, which has turned into a really fun piece in the collection, which Natalia has used. And that's something we may explore a little further. Natalia, if you're watching, sorry I didn't reply to your email the other day. I saw you're back in Miami, and we do need to pick that conversation up. And then a lovely collection with Sophie Patterson, which has been really well received, and it's been, really fun to develop. And the key to these collaborations, we tend to work with designers who we really enjoy working with. And so why not take that relationship, further and more closely? And it's there's always something happening like that.
And Tim, how do you see our relationship with our homes and our interiors changing? In what we're going through, and just changes that are happening with COVID and beyond.
I think how many conversations are happening in the world today where we can't talk about the coronavirus impact on what it means to all of us. We're all of us having to question what we value. We're having to question, and prioritize the things in our lives which we almost haven't thought about so much before. And the one ray of sunshine within our industry is perhaps a lot of our clients, a lot of very wealthy individuals who we need, and they're the lifeblood of so many of the designers and makers around the world, because without them some of these wonderful products just wouldn't be possible to produce. I just hope that in this strange period where they are spending more time at home, they may be reflecting and valuing that actually maybe rather than the latest handbag and making sure I'm in Davos this year, and whether I should or shouldn't go for the 130-foot or the 100-foot yacht, maybe they can just think about, actually, this space, which is my home, maybe I should really learn to appreciate the value here. My home is not another property investment in my portfolio. It's a place where I should feel nourished, and surrounding myself with beauty which I value and which speaks to me deeply is a very worthwhile use of the wealth which they have, created for themselves. So I think that may be one of the things, is that we're all looking at the space which is our home as something which we should really cherish, and we should surround ourselves with beauty within it, because it really does matter at a time like this. I think that is one potential, you know, ray of sunshine for us who work in that world. Equally, perhaps something that's been happening, I feel, over the past couple of decades, as technology has made so much possible, I think there has been for a while a counterbalancing appreciation of the handmade element and things that are made with, you know, a lifetime's study to create skill and craft and value. So I think there's sort of, you know, I think that's been happening for a while, you know, digital technology, various aspects of production make almost anything possible, but I still see an equal valuation for the things that are harder and the things that take time and the things that take skill and a lifetime's of work to achieve. So I think that's another thing which is going in parallel in the design industry, and particularly at the high end of the design industry, is that appreciation of genuine and slow craft when the reproduction of it through more simple methods is getting very, very close to the possibilities, but it never takes away from that sort of true bespoke, you know, that authenticity of the individual made item by the craftsman. So.
And I mean, we obviously craftsmanship is extremely important in what you do, and we hear a lot about companies at this point saying, oh, we should evaluate where we're producing, maybe we should move our production. Is that something you are considering?
Well, it's obviously I was in China early January, because our painting studios, our embroidery studios, our silk studios are all in China, and ordinarily I'd be there every 6 weeks or so, working with the artists there. And you know, what's been happening at the moment has made a lot of people certainly feel that, you know, everything maybe should be closer to home, and this sort of a regionalism, and there's a lot of very good arguments for it. I think for Fromental, our choice to place our studios in China is not really one which has come from, well, you know, it's a pay differential, it's a cost element. It's never been from that. There's a heritage and a methodology within Chinese painting and within the craftsmanship which is there, which really wouldn't be possible anywhere else. And I mean, and there's many, many different layers to that. I mean, obviously, you know, the paper behind me and some of the chinoiserie papers, which I love, they are born directly out of traditional Chinese painting and clearly a skill and aesthetic which has come through from that. But there's other elements to that which are a little bit more technical and important. And that is the fact that the way that, you know, for example, the way that somebody learns and studies painting in traditional Chinese painting has been the same for pretty much 400 years. You know, and anyone who's an artist who's doing an apprenticeship with us will still study the same way. So there's a book of painting techniques, or a guide to painting, called The Mustard Seed Garden. And it's a series of block prints showing the form of different plants and elements within nature. And the way that you will learn to paint is by reproducing those forms. So you learn a toolkit or a set of skills which are very, very structured. And so, and what that gives in the commercial sense and in a production sense is the fact that we can have 35 artists, 10 of them can be working on one room, and to a certain degree their skills are the same.
Which is not something you would find here, where the
I mean, you know, what were we taught at art school? Express yourself, find your own style, which is fabulous. But it means if you were to ask 10 people to paint the same bamboo leaf, each one of those bamboo leaves would be different. Whereas the way that the thing that you know, the painting is learned in China does mean that you can have those not so much interchangeable skills, but reproducible skills. Now, within that, you obviously want to retain character and expression And we do work very hard to try to build into our designs an element where the artists who are working and within the production can to some degree feel they have their own personal stamp. But in a very basic way, if I've got 35 panels in a large room and they all sit side by side, they have a character which runs through them, which isn't jarring. So running back to what you said, you know, is there a regionalism there? Those skills and those elements, that's something I really feel we have to do in China. Now, would I love to have a hand painting studio in the UK? I would dearly love to do that. And I've long had treasured this idea of having, you know, a workshop in the country where, you know, a different style of painting could use brushes for hire in a different way. I've always loved that in our industry, when you're working on sites in London, you can meet a painter and decorator who's ended up kind of, that's his trade. Yeah. But at the weekends and the evenings and various days of the week, they're actually more of a fine artist. Yeah. I know one of our paper hangers who's a fine artist outside of it. You know, so all artists, I think, have this journeyman aspect where they've had to have a trade that sits with it. So I think you could have a really cool workshop somewhere in the UK where these sort of, these occasional journeyman artists could come in as and when and paint them. I'd love to do that, but it would be a different thing from what we do now, but I'd love to do it.
If the regions are listening to us, and perhaps this is an opportunity for them to get in touch with you, because there are excellent art schools around the country, and
definitely
I think it's important to start our conversation. I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to be specific about a government, but do you feel that government in general supports and understands the importance of design, you know, to our economy and nation?
I think over the last 20 years or so, I think it's undeniable that the creative sector in Britain is a huge part of our image abroad. It's huge. It is a huge industry for us. Many different aspects of it, whether it be from fashion, different parts of design, interiors, and so I think there is a lot of awareness of the importance of it. Is there much in the specific commercial support? I'm less sure. I mean, I certainly know that in the years since founding Fromental, I've not managed to secure any very specific support up until actually more recently. There's very good support for R&D and research and development and technical research and development in the UK. And we do a lot of technically experimental work, and so we can gain some support for that. But I remember the first time I was filling in the application form for these grants which are available, it very clearly states that it is only when you take a technical process risk that the government will support it as being innovative attitude which requires, you know, support and funding. And there's no equivalent for taking aesthetic and creative and bold design risks. And now every time, if you're, you know, over the years, I've become more and more involved in the finances of the company, and I have to spend as much time on the P&L as I do on the drawing board, unfortunately. But when you're looking at that always bothers me, because when we're assessing a design as to whether we're going to launch it, which is a really expensive thing to do. Yes. The drive which comes from the pure sort of commercial hat is always very much to say, you know, is this what our clients want and will they buy it? Now, of course, that needs to be there. But what British design has shown as at its most bold and defining element, it is where you take the risk beyond what you know people want. It's when you produce the design that actually, for the next 2 years, people don't even know they want it. Some of our boldest and over time best-selling designs don't sell for nearly 2 or 3 years. Because if you do something that's really different, and is really pushing the boundaries, it takes that length of time before it's absorbed and people question and feel confident enough to use it. If you have to sort of take that forward, it's a huge commercial risk. And as reading back to what you said, you know, does the government support that? If the creative sector in Britain had not done things which shocked people originally and took a long time before people realized that actually, yes, this is what people want, we would not be as respected as we are today. And there is absolutely no support for taking that kind of risk. And I feel that kind of creative risk is just as valid as when you take a technical risk by pushing something R&D, which may have, you know, it might work, it might not technically. Well, it might work and it might not creatively, aesthetically. And even if it does work, it's a long-term investment which nobody is underwriting. No bank is going to say to me, I see what you mean. People are saying they're not ready for your design. Great, we'll support you in launching it. Nobody does that. And they should. So that would be where I think all of the talk about people loving the fact that in Britain, we are always at the cutting edge and we are doing bold things. Well, actually, that could do with being supported. The people who are making the avant-garde items and the challenging items, which in 5 or 10 years' time will be the ones that everyone remembers and are appearing elsewhere. You don't get any support for being the risk taker on the creative front.
I mean, and these bold choices are the choices that I think define this country's creative output. To end the conversation, what can you tell us? Why do you think British design is worth it?
Ooh. I think the easiest way to see that clearly is just is a kind of mirror to what I was saying a moment ago. When you look back on what defined the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc., and when you look back on what culturally what had value, it was where it was that, back to what we said, it was that risk taking.
Yeah.
It was that, you know, those exciting moments where somebody was bold enough to go forward and take a chance. Now, Britain has always done that. And if we look back at the past, it's 100% clear that it was worth taking the risk. So we just need to remember that when we're questioning now, should I worry, you know, should I feel strongly about this now? Should I feel proud about this now? Should I feel bold about doing this now? I think when you look back in the past, clearly it's worthwhile. So remember that when you're making decisions today. So equally now, yes, grasp that, you know, grasp those bold choices, grasp those creative decisions, grasp those leaps into the dark. They are worth it, because that, when we look back on our lives, that's the bit that mattered. So.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for all of those inspiring words this afternoon. I invite everyone who's watching to visit the Fromental website, to continue following your Instagram feed. I wish you great continued success, and congratulations again on your 15 years. And thank you to everyone who's watching. We hope you're energized, and we look forward to seeing you soon again on Interiors Academy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Miriam.